Hi there, this is Professor Shannon Gracie from Miracosta College, and we are now covering section 7.3 in Robert Blitzer's Introductory and Intermediate Algebra for College Students text. And this is our very last section for our summer course. So here we go. We will be adding and subtracting rational expressions with the same denominator, and then we'll also look at adding and subtracting rational expressions with opposite denominators today. So let's warm up. The first warm-up has us simplifying. And pause the movie and see how you do. Okay, let's see how you did. If you take a look here, we almost have the same factors. So if you recall, you can either factor out a negative, or if you don't like the factoring out the negative business, what you can do is you can multiply both numerator and denominator by -1 over -1. And the trick is you don't multiply both negative ones throughout. What you do is you pick one of them. So I'll go ahead and multiply the negative throughout the numerator. And notice we'll end up getting -b squared plus a squared over a squared minus b squared, and then we still have the -1 hanging out. Now, commuting the terms in the numerator, do you see we'll get a squared minus b squared? And it's true that that one will factor, but it's already the same as this guy. So you know what? Why don't we make our lives easier and go ahead and divide out here. Okay? And at the end of the day, we will get 1 over -1, which ends up giving us a result of -1. So that rational expression simplifies to be -1. How'd you do? Awesome! Alright, let's go on to the next guy. Okay, so the numerator will factor as x minus 1, the quantity squared. We have a perfect square trinomial. Or if you factored using the x, you probably got x minus 1 times x minus 1. Now let's look here at the denominator, right? This one, I'm going to do this one a little differently. We're going to factor out a negative, so that way you can decide which way you like better. So if I factor out a -1, do you see I'll get -1 plus x? So this is how the numerator factored, and the denominator factors like this. Well, this is equivalent to x minus 1, the quantity squared, over -1 times x minus 1. Now notice that's like x minus 1 to the 1. So what will happen is, let's do it like this time. We will have a negative, all right, from that -1, and we will end up with x minus 1 to the 2 minus 1 using the properties for exponents. We're dividing the same base, so we subtract the exponents. There's a power of 1 on this guy. So we will end up with a result of x minus 1 to the 1, and that's the opposite of that. So you can either put your result as the opposite of x minus 1, or you could have put -x plus 1. It's up to you. All right, so onward. If P over R and Q over R are rational expressions, then P over R plus Q over R, notice they have the same denominator, so we can add the numerators and put them over that common denominator. So to add rational expressions with the same denominator, add numerators and place the sum over the common denominator. If possible, simplify the result. So we're attacking this a little bit differently. When you're adding rational expressions, you wait on that factoring step. So if you recall, with simplifying rational expressions, multiplying rational expressions, and dividing rational expressions, we factored very early in the problem. Now here we first need to find the sum or difference, depending on what you have, and then you compute that sum, and then you simplify as your last step. All right, so here we go. Subtracting. So if we have, again, P over R and Q over R, and they're rational expressions, then P over R minus Q over R gives us P minus Q all over R. So to subtract rational expressions with the same denominator, subtract numerators, and place the difference over the common denominator, and then at the end simplify the result. Okay, so let's take a look at our first example. Add or subtract is indicated. So first up, you check, you make sure you have the same denominator, right? So here we go. Part A, each denominator is 15. So first off, put your common denominator of 15. We do not add denominators, okay? We put that common denominator just that once. Then we're adding the numerator, the two numerators. So 1x plus 4x is 5x over 15. And now notice we can simplify. 5 goes into itself once and into 15 3 times. So at the end of the day, we get 1 times x is x over 3. And we're done. All right. So you guys go ahead, pause the movie, and you try B, C, and D and see how you do. Okay, let's see how it went. So here we go. In part B, we have a common denominator of 9. We are adding x plus 4 plus 2x minus 25. Now, notice I don't need those parentheses, so I'll take them off. And that's all over 9. And then combining like terms, I'll get 3x's minus 21 all over 9. I'll just go down here. I can factor out a 3 from the numerator, and I'll be left with x minus 7, and that's all over 9. So this is how I'm on the simplifying step, and that's when you factor. And notice 3 goes into itself once and into 9 3 times. So my end result will be x minus 7 all over 3. How'd you do? I bet you did great. Okay. Part C. Here we go. Checking my denominator. I've got the same denominator. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and write that common denominator down. Then I am taking x minus 1. So that is merely x minus 1 over x minus 1. So x minus 1 goes into itself once. So believe it or not, this simplifies to be 1 over 1, which is 1. All right, part D. We have a common denominator of 3x plus 4, so we're going to put that down right away. And then we're going to be adding 3x's plus 2, and then plus 3x plus 6. Well, we don't need those parentheses, so I'll rewrite it like this. And then I end up with 6x plus 8 over 3x plus 4. I can factor out a 2 from the numerator, and I'm left with 3x plus 4. That's over 3x plus 4. So this here, this is the part where we factor so we can simplify. 3x plus 4 goes into itself one time. So at the end of the day, this simplified to be 2 over 1, which is 2. Alrighty. Now why don't you go ahead and pause the movie and give E, F, and G a try. E, F, and G. Okay. All right, let's see how you did. So here we go. I am looking at the fact that we have a common denominator of 2x to the 4th. Now we're subtracting. So we've got x cubed minus 3 minus 7x cubed minus 3. So x cubed minus 3, I have to distribute the minus throughout the second parentheses. Oops, sorry. About to make up my own math there. That'll be a plus 3. And then we have our common denominator of 2x to the 4th. So then we'll get, let's see, negative 6x cubed. And you see it'll be negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And then we have 2x to the 4th. So then we will get negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and then we'll get x to the 3 minus 4, which is negative 3x to the negative 1, which is negative 3 over x. Okay, so just to clarify, I got the negative 3 from that. And then using the properties for exponents is how I did this guy here. Okay. So next up, part F, we have the same denominator. This denominator is 4x squared minus 11x's minus 3. And then we're going to have x squared plus 9x's plus 3x minus 5x squared. This will be x squared plus 9x plus 3x minus 5x squared over 4x squared minus 11x minus 3. We will get negative 4x squared plus 12x over. Now I'm going to take a look at factoring the denominator. So let's see, we have an overall product of negative 12. So, and then a middle term of -11, that coefficient. So I believe if we did -12 and +1, those numbers would work. So 4x squared minus 12x's plus 1x and then minus 3. So here I've got this is equivalent to this so far. And then, you know, you do your red group and your blue group for your factoring. And then we will have, if we factor out from the numerator, I can factor out a -4x, and I'm left with 3x. Whoops, I am left with x minus 3. So this is the way I'm on the simplifying portion of it. This is the way the numerator can factor. And then I could factor out a 4x, and I'm left with x minus 3 and plus 1 times x minus 3. So this is the continuation of the factoring of the denominator. So carrying on the factored numerator, I can factor out an x minus 3, and I'm left with 4x plus 1. So this is the completely factored denominator. And then take a look. X minus 3 divides out on numerator and denominator. And then our end result is -4x over 4x plus 1, and we are done. Okay, let's look at this next guy. All right, so we have a common denominator of 3y squared plus 10y minus 8. And then we have a 3y squared minus 2 minus quantity y plus 10 minus quantity y squared minus 6y's. So we will get 3y squared minus 2 minus y minus 10. So I'm distributing that minus through, minus y squared plus 6y. All over 3y squared plus 10y minus 8. So this will give us a result of 2y squared and so we have a minus y and a positive 6y, so plus 5y and then minus 12 all over 3y squared plus 10y minus 8. Now we need to see if these guys factor. So if we do our x's, I'll go ahead and put them in down here. So for the numerator, overall product of -24 and then a middle term of +5. So we need a difference that results in +5. So I believe the two numbers that fit the bill are -3 and +8. So we will have 2y squared minus 3y plus 8y minus 12 over. Just doing the factoring for the denominator. Overall product of -24, the 3 times the -8. And then, let's see, middle term of +10, that's the result of a difference. I believe the two numbers that fit the bill are -2 and +12. So we will have, whoops, not another equals. We'll have 3y squared minus 2y plus 12y minus 8. So the numerator, I'm on the factoring part because I'm simplifying. And this is the start of the denominator. So here we go. And again, you know, this is all the whole factoring by grouping business. So we're using all our wonderful skills. So in the numerator, if I factor out a y, I'm left with 2y minus 3. And then if I factor out a positive 4, I'm left with 2y minus 3 all over. Let's see, in the denominator, I can factor out a y. I'm left with 3y minus 2. And if I factor out a positive 4, I'm left with 3y minus 2. So the yellow is on its way to being factored, as is the blue. Okay, next up, I have a common factor of 2y minus 3 in the numerator, and I'm left with a y plus 4. So now the numerator is completely factored. And then the denominator, I can factor out 3y minus 2, and I'm left with y plus 4. So the denominator is now fully factored. And I can divide out the y plus 4 factor. And at the end of the day, I am left with 2y minus 3 over 3y minus 2. And we're all set. All right. So our very last task is to be able to add and subtract rational expressions that have opposite denominators. So when one denominator is the opposite or additive inverse of the other, first multiply either rational expression by -1 over, let me write that a little better, by -1 over -1 to obtain a common denominator. Remember, the denominators need to be the same in order to add or subtract. So here we go. So this first one, notice that the denominators are almost the same. They're just opposite. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and multiply the second one by -1 over -1. So then what will happen is we will get 6x plus 7 over x minus 6, and then plus -3x over, now notice that, well, I'll write it out. So we'll have -6 plus x when I distribute that -1 throughout the second denominator. This gives us 6x plus 7 over x minus 6 plus -3x's over x minus 6 if I commute those terms. Now I have a common denominator, and it's just like the other stuff we were doing. So now, putting the common denominator down as my denominator, I will have 6x plus 7 plus -3x, which gives me, so 6x minus 3x is positive 3x plus 7 over x minus 6. Both of these are, you know, the numerator and denominator are prime polynomials, so we're all set. We're done. Okay. Okay, so go ahead and pause the movie and you guys try B, C, and D, and then we'll be all done with section 7.3 and with our MiraCosta beginning algebra course. Okay, let's see how you did on part B. Again, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the second denominator by -1. So then this will give us x squared over x minus 3 plus -9 over -3 plus x. We will have x squared over x minus 3 plus -9 over x minus 3. Now we have the same denominator, so do you see we will have x squared minus 9 over x minus 3. But I can factor that difference of squares in the numerator to be x plus 3 times x minus 3, and that's over x minus 3. So this guy factors as this, and then we can divide out that common factor of x minus 3, and we're left with x plus 3 over 1, which is just x plus 3. How'd you do? Awesome. I bet you did really great. Okay, so part C, up here. Again, let's do that second fraction, and I'll show you a little trick here. Now, this will give us, I think I have room on the side, so this will give us 4 minus x over x minus 9. Now here's the trick. Do you see here we've got minus a minus? So instead of distributing that negative 1 through the 3x minus 8 and then distributing again when you subtract, I'm going to turn that minus a minus into a plus. So this is the result of the minus a minus. Then we'll have 3x minus 8 over negative 9 plus x. So this is going to give us 4 minus x over x minus 9 plus 3x minus 8 over x minus 9, which will give us 4 minus x plus 3x's minus 8 all over that common denominator of x minus 9. So then negative x plus 3x is 2x's, and 4 minus 8 is negative 4. And then we'll have that over x minus 9. And then factoring the numerator, we get 2 times quantity x minus 2 over x minus 9. There's no common factors, so this is our final result. Okay, and part D. Again, multiplying by negative 1 over negative 1 on that second fraction, we will have 2x plus 3 over x squared minus x minus 30, and then plus negative x plus 2 over negative 30 minus x plus x squared when I distribute that minus through. This will give us 2x plus 3 over x squared minus x minus 30 plus negative x plus 2 over, I'll commute those terms and get x squared minus x minus 30. I now have the same denominator, so I can add and I will have this result here. So then, once I combine like terms, 2x minus x is 1x, and 3 plus 2 is 5. And then I'm going to factor that denominator. And you see that we can factor that denominator as, I believe it'll factor as x plus 5 times x minus 6. So here's the factored form of the denominator, which will give us a result of, we can divide out the x minus 5's, and then we will get 1, don't forget the 1 in the numerator, over x minus 6, and we are all done. Okay? So have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your summer. Bye.